Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss my thoughts about John Prescott with the news today that he's passed away aged 86, in particular about his role as Deputy Prime Minister for the last Labour government, because there's more than a few parallels with the current Deputy, Angela Rayner. But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So, John Prescott is a very unusual politician. Back when Labour had to replace John Smith, who died of a heart attack, I'd wanted Prescott to win. Like, how would it have been otherwise? I was a teenager interested in politics, and he was a straight-talking Yorkshireman. And Tony Blair, you know, he had that insurance salesman vibe about him, didn't he? And we'll never know what Labour would have been like under his leadership, but he was an absolutely brilliant deputy. As Tony Blair said, Prescott was not at all New Labour, but his focus was on making sure that Labour would win elections and be the best it could in government. You know, I've often thought there were a few parallels between Prescott and, so far at any rate, Rayner, both from working class backgrounds, and they sound like it. You know, their accents, though from very different areas, really seem to get up some Tories' noses. You know, and it's been obvious that Rayner has not agreed with a lot of what Starmer has done, in the same way Prescott did not agree with Blair on things. But they both worked to make it a success, and both succeeded in doing so, although Rayner still has some way to go before we can properly evaluate. And it's to be hoped that there are a couple of things, which Prescott did have to do, that I hope Rayner never has to. John Prescott was often like a childminder when Blair and Brown were squabbling. It's very infuriating when the two of them were clearly so close politically. Like they'd been as thick as thieves for years until Smith's death. You know, it was like the Corbyn and McDonnell relationship until the moment they had to compete for the leadership and accept that one would have to bow out for the other. Otherwise, they'd split a common vote and let someone like John Prescott in. Literally the only major difference they seemed to have ahead of the 1997 election. And yet it seemed to sour relations all through the time in government. And I think the only reason it didn't cause massive problems and like spill over too badly was because Brown was given prime ministerial level power over the budget. I mean, normally a chancellor is, of course, powerful, yes, but the prime minister is looking over their shoulder and rubbing a few things out. But the deal was, as far as I could tell, that Gordon Brown would have free reign at the Treasury, do exactly what he likes with the economy, and Tony Blair would just deal with everything else. There'd be this huge blind spot for him where the Treasury was concerned. But Prescott still had to keep smoothing troubled brows and act as like a go-between at times, all very childish. I'm not sure I see the same thing being needed with Starmer and Reeves, thankfully. So Rayner will be able to concentrate on her really important job of housing and community infrastructure because, you know, Labour are going to absolutely depend on that project working. But there's another thing that Prescott famously had to do, which I hope Rayner doesn't, as funny as it might be to watch. Punching the occasional knobhead. Now, I can't remember where I read it now. There's one of the articles I was reading today I took exception to. And it talked about how Prescott had a bit of a temper. And then went into a story of how he lamped a guy who threw an egg at him. Now, that was not an example of losing your temper. That was an example of what happens when you land a blow from the blind spot against the head of a former boxer. You know, oh, it was just an egg, which can still be dangerous, but he didn't know it was an egg, did he? No, he just felt a blow to the side of his head. You know, you physically assault a boxer, you don't get to pose for photos with your bruises and get to play the victim. I'm sorry. He didn't punch Chumbawamba, for example, did he, when they threw water over him? Because that wouldn't have been mistaken for a physical assault in the same way. I'll bet he was pissed off about it. So no, temper had nothing to do with it. And Blair's line, I remember Blair's line, when he was asked about it. And he just said, well, John is John. You know, as if to say, well, you know, other politicians probably wouldn't have done that. But at the end of the day, you know, take it as a warning. Don't assault John Prescott in future. But Prescott wasn't just a useful bruiser, metaphorically and literally. He didn't make a habit of punching people, I have to say. You know, and of course he had good links with unions, and all of those things were a good backup for Blair. But he was on top of his game in debates as well. I still remember the debate he had with Michael Heseltine over the introduction of the minimum wage. And yes, he could be a bit performative at times in terms of like the sort of pointless stunts you get from most politicians, but he knew his stuff. It was really not easy to get one over on him. And Rayner has also proven to be fairly useful since becoming deputy leader as well. You know, again, it's tale of two halves here. Rayner's proven herself when the Conservatives have been the government. We'll see what it's like in a few years' time when Labour have to defend their own record in government, but so far shaping up very nicely. You know, in Rayner's case as well, the decision to make her deputy had nothing to do with Starmer. That's where there's a difference here. She was forced upon him by a rule introduced by Ed Miliband, which has the power to cause problems within the party, as the first version showed. You know, but Prescott was chosen by Blair because he saw him as covering his blind spot and bringing some political clout to his leadership. It is a testament to how effective Prescott was in the role that he remained the deputy leader throughout Blair's leadership. He wasn't just an initial pick until Blair had established his authority. He remained deputy throughout. In fact, you know, I had to think a little bit about deputy leaders. Now, this isn't gospel because it's not easy to check. The Conservatives don't have like official deputy leaders a lot of the time. But by my reckoning, since 1997, Labour and the Conservatives have been in power for roughly the same amount of time. But in that time, Labour have had 4 deputy leaders. The Conservatives, on the other hand, by my reckoning, have had 10. And that is not including deputy party leaders when David Cameron was leader for about 12 years. Because I don't think he had any. If he did, I'm just failing to find them. And in that case, it would actually be more than 10. It's just an indication of how much more stable Labour are in both government and opposition. But it is funny to think about the parallels. The last Labour government was initially led by a lawyer, backed up by a working class deputy who wasn't afraid to use their background to piss off the toffs in the Conservative Party. And history seems to be repeating itself in that regard, at least. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.